The Branding Your Business podcast is for small business owners looking to build a customer favorite brand and a value-driven business. From solo shows covering marketing tactics to experts sharing their brand stories, each episode delivers actionable insights for entrepreneurs who want to impact the world. We're sharing how strategic moves and authentic connections can build a profitable business minus the burnout. Tune into the Branding Your Business podcast with me, Praise Santos McKenna of Come Plum, to design a brand your audience adores while building a life you love.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Branding Your Business podcast. It's me, your host, Praise Santos McKenna. I am the founder of the branding studio Come Plum in San Francisco, California. And I am fangirling today because in the wide world of internet, in the wide world of brand design, I've been following Kadie Smith for a while. And she sent out an email newsletter not too long ago. And I was like, Kadie, this is amazing. Do you want to have a conversation? And we'll record it and we'll hang out and have a good time. Thankfully, she said yes. And so let me tell you a little bit about her. Kadie Smith is a traveling art director and brand strategist committed to building strategic and magnetic identities for modern brands. In 2014, she started her studio Dropcap Designs out of a desire to support her friends in the creative industry, the artists who had talent and potential that was hidden from the world. Along the way, she has worked with over 200 independent businesses to help tell their story to a captivated audience. In most cases, she had the privilege of further developing those brands once they found massive success post-launch. I'm so excited to have her on here, but a bio can only tell us so much. So, Kadie, tell us a little bit more what your daily life looks like. What are you waking up to these days?
Yeah, so these days I'm actually waking up to super sunny Costa Rica. I moved down here 2 years ago, full time after spending a lot of winters on extended hiatus down here to surf and escape the winter. And now I call it my home full time.
Did you get to surf in today? What was today like?
You know, today I didn't. Today I woke up, I actually have both of my brothers and my sister-in-law visiting. And so I woke up and got some work in while they're on a day trip, and they'll be joining us back this afternoon. And we're going to go to sunset at a new beach. So today was wake up and work. But most days I try to.
This is the best though. This is why I also convince people, like, you need to work for yourself so that your personal and professional life kind of has this flexibility. That's kind of the best. You're like, oh yeah, I'm hosting. Oh yeah, we'll like go to a beach later. Oh, was your background in the corporate world? Were you in a more structured environment before this?
You know, that's a great question. And I was only at a corporate agency for 5 months after graduating from design school. I had wanted to move out to Texas from where I had gone to school in Alabama and got the first agency job I could find. My dream was to be in editorial publication, but it was 2013 and like print was dying. Nobody was hiring. They were all trying to consolidate. So it's like, well, I'm just going to work at an agency for a little while until the magazine industry kind of recovers. Ended up hating it. And it was at the time where like the design blogs, like Design Love Fest, Oh Joy, all of those were really huge. And I just remember thinking I would give anything to just like be a design blogger. And all I wanted to do was to be able to just like, do my own creative work from like Starbucks. And it's so funny that like that initial dream has expanded and expanded and expanded. And now it brought me all the way to Costa Rica.
She meant a Starbucks in Costa Rica. She didn't know she meant that way.
I didn't know I did that, but apparently that's what I meant. At the time, I was just like, a Starbucks in Dallas is fine.
100%. I get that. Also, Oh Joy, one of her books on creativity was the thing that also gave me the encouragement, like, okay, we could do this. Did you ever read that? It was called like
Yes.
Creative Biz.
Yes, I had a copy of it and I had like everything underlined, so many notes in the margin. I was like, I can do this. And I think it was a little bit of like delusion in the early days of the internet where I was like, I could figure this out, and quickly realized just how much work goes into something like that. But you know, ignorance is bliss. And it turns out like a little bit of that, what healthy delusion helped me take the leap and just figure it out from there.
Thing too. It's like delusion, but also just the energy you need to start, or like the drive to start, which if we go back to the beginning, was it always called Drop Cap? How did that name come about? What's the story there?
Yeah. So originally I called it Design by Kadie. And I thought I'm just going to like do illustration, layout. I hadn't really even done branding that much at that point, just like a little dabble here and there. But as I started to get my first couple of clients, it was doing additional like illustration work for my friends who were artists, like jewelry makers or potters or photographers. And I kept seeing, especially like some of my friends who were makers, spend every weekend just spending hours at like a farmer's market or some kind of maker's market trying to sell their goods. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. You're trying to sell everything to like a group of 20 people who aren't going to be spending that much money. But if you put all of your stuff online, you have a larger audience. So I started doing branding and helping people with websites who were just my artist friends and ended up loving it. And then quickly got overwhelmed. And so I actually hired one of my good friends who was a designer in Dallas to help me. And then it started getting really confusing because it's like, okay, designed by Kadie, but like it might be Kadie and it might be Allie. It just depends on like who's more busy. So I was like, I have to change the name of my business. And it was kind of that feeling where I was 2 years in and I built a lot of visibility with Design by Kadie. And I was like, I don't know how to change the name. I don't know what to change it to, but like I need to do it fast. And so I was going through like so many different ideas. And I went back to my roots of like, what did I originally love? And it was editorial and publication design. So then I started looking at typography terms. And the drop cap was my favorite part of magazine design school. And it's because the drop cap is like the big illustrated letter at the beginning of a magazine article or like an old illustrated book. And what I loved about it is in layout design, so much of it is like rule following, like following a rubric, following a grid system. But that drop cap was like your chance to like have a lot of creative flair. And so I fell in love with it because I started thinking like, that's kind of how I want the brands that I do for my friends to be. It follows the grid. It makes sense within the industry, but there's just like little bit of specialness to it that catches your eye, makes you want to learn more, like sparks curiosity. And so I was like, I have to have it. Like drop cap design is it. And I start researching and there's another agency using drop cap design. I was like, crap, I can't think of anything else. But they hadn't done anything in like 2 years. So I sent a Facebook message, but they had every social channel, the website domain, like everything. I just like send a message to the owner on Facebook Messenger, like back in, I guess this was like 2016, 2017. And I was like, I haven't noticed any activity. I'm in love with the name. Here's my vision behind it. Here's why it's meaningful to me. Like, would you ever consider selling it? And to this day, I owe her so much. But she was like, I just took a corporate job. I have been freelancing for so long. I'm done. I would love for it to go to a new home, take everything and run. And just gifted me like every social channel, the domain, all of it, just gifted. And she's like, I'm so happy to see it like have a new chapter, new life. And she had done branding for sports industries. So also it was like creating a whole new industry, like going in a different direction. And then I also felt like I had like such a duty to honor that gifting that I like, it made it even more meaningful to me.
Love that, because on the podcast, we equip a lot of business owners to be their own brand managers, to create brands that people love. And oftentimes when they think of, okay, this is going to be the business, what is going to be the name? What embodies this thing I want it to present? And your story is so good. It's a mix of research, aha moments, soul searching, and also a lot of generosity from that other owner. And it seems like you keep on paying it forward and you keep on resourcing your people in a very generous way. So I feel like we can learn so much from that. I mentioned earlier in the introduction, the reason why I reached out to Kadie is in a newsletter back in October, you were writing about, okay, I just did this chat GPT prompt and I basically cried.
Yeah.
And it was really fascinating. And I was like, oh my goodness, we need to walk through this just because our folks need to learn about, again, it's like really technical framework stuff, but a lot of the work we do, especially in working with businesses and brands to be like the visionaries, is this kind of emotional connection. So can you walk us through this AI prompt exercise and maybe how it's even grown since October?
Totally. So I've always been into like vision casting, goal setting. Like I am someone who always has like 7 planners going. Like I am a paper girl. And it all started this year when one of my favorite influencers shut down her business. I took a bunch of her business courses and I was just obsessed with her. And so then I became obsessed with figuring out like why she shut down the business. And in doing so, researched every piece of content she'd ever put out. And she had also put out this like goal setting journal. So I went on eBay, found someone who was selling one of like the original versions of the journal to send to me. And I just wanted to like keep a copy, almost like a memento for like a business that no longer exists. But I started going through the exercises and I was like, I really love this feeling of like casting a new vision. So as all things happen, you start getting targeted algorithm on social media for the things that like you're currently obsessed with. So then I started getting targeted for all of this vision casting, goal setting content in like September. And I came across this trend where people were asking ChatGPT to tell them a day in their life based on what their goals were. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. Because ChatGPT takes it just a step further on brainstorming than I think we often do for ourselves. So I took all of like the exercises that I had done in her workbook, all of like the notes and brainstorming of like, what would I like for my life a year from now? What would I like 3 years from now, 5 years from now? And I'm such a storytelling person that I was like, okay, write a story of a day in my life at 1 year, 3 year, 5 year based on these goals. And so I started off in the 5 year because it's like, you know, the most romantic and like involved. Then I go to 3. Then I was like a year from today. And then my favorite part and the part that like made me emotional is I was like, okay, here's what my current life looks like, what I'm struggling with, what I'm enjoying, what keeps me up at night, like a full look at my life right now. I was like, okay, so based on where I'm wanting to be a year from now, how can I make the most of where I am right now? And like, what can I appreciate about the part in the journey I am that's leading towards where I'm going? And seeing this mirror between, okay, I have so much that I'm excited about for the future and so much to appreciate about where I am in the process right now, that it just like unleashed so much for me. When I wrote it, I was like back in the States this summer visiting family and then getting to do it again when we came back this season. Okay, coming back, what does my intention need to be? Where does my focus need to be, knowing where I'm trying to go a year from now? And really using ChatGPT as like a way to stay focused. Like I always thought about it as like a first draft for writing blogs or emails, but I didn't think about it as far as like, okay, here's everything that's on my plate. Like what should I focus on? What's aligned with my vision? Like what's going to get me closer to where I'm trying to go? And using a tool like that to really help consolidate information and make sense of competing priorities.
Okay, that is so powerful. Also, love your commitment to the following of this influencer. eBay, this is the best. I love meeting another obsessed person who are like, I'm basically a detective. I'm not going to give up on this.
Sure. I was like, I am like full blown research mode. Like I will follow a rabbit hole all the way down to the very end.
We love a committed woman. We love to see it. Okay, so you were like, okay, ChatGPT, I've been doing all this work in my journal. Help me like bring this out further. What is my life a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And then you were able to take it when you came back to Costa Rica for the season of, okay, how do I use this almost as a coach and a guide to say yes to the right things, to say no to the wrong things? Okay, without giving away your whole vision, unless you're comfortable, what was it about your 5-year vision that was so dreamy that you're like, because of that, I'm waking up earlier today, or because of that, I am saying yes to this thing?
Yeah, actually, what was the most eye-opening for me is that I realized, other than like a few key life things that you have no control over, because that was the other thing I wanted to like differentiate between is like the things that I have control over and the things I don't have control over. And some things that you don't have control over is like becoming a mom, getting married, like things that are involve a little bit of help from the universe. But there were so many things I did have control over, like how I felt each day, how I spent my time, what healthy habits I had, how I took care of myself, how I invested in my creativity, things that I had learned how to do. And I realized that the version of myself 10 years from now that's important to me is almost like an accumulation of what life is starting to look like now, which is a community of culturally like diverse friends, a life of adventure and travel and trying new things, a more artistic life where I have a lot of handmade things and I'm cooking a lot more like complicated meals and I'm painting and I'm making things for my home. Like I kept saying, I feel like I'm just trying to do like life right now, but just to the nth degree, this, but more, this, but like a continuation. And what I realized wasn't on there was like these massive financial goals or like huge awards or, some of the things that I felt like in the online business space. In the day to day, I feel like I need to chase after like huge influence, publishing 1 million books. Like there's a plethora of dreams on the internet. And it can be easy to be like, well, I'm just going to add that to my list because it sounds cool and I want something to aspire to. But then when I actually did the storytelling component on ChatGPT with like the woman I want to be and the life that I want to cultivate down the road, it was so much simpler than I thought it would be. And so for instance, like I really want to be someone who's like cooking and like, nourishing my body more and like having people over and cooking for them. And I was like, okay, well, that's amazing. That just means that like over the next year, I'm going to prioritize like learning to make some like signature dishes and like learning how to put together an amazing dinner party. And all of a sudden, this like aspiration of being this like phenomenal cook isn't like one day when I have all the time and I've, made so much money and I have all this help and but then I'll do it. I was like, no, this is just a matter of saying like work stops at 4:30. It also helped because as I was going through the list, it was like, I want to like do more handmade things. I want to create more art. I want to write more. I want to learn how to take better photos. Like all of these little, honestly, they were like all creative hobbies. But as I started going down, I then matched it with a Pinterest board of like, okay, so visually, what does life look like if like this story is true? And then it just starts to feel so aligned because once it's like a vision, it's an idea in your head and then it's a visual in your head. And then you just really start being drawn to those things. Like those opportunities start finding you. Your awareness, like I'm more aware of opportunities to cook dinner with my girlfriends. Or like last night, me and 2 of my friends got together and we made like clay pottery and drink wine. And I was like, these things are just maybe if I had been still like chasing, I got to get this evergreen funnel together or I got to figure out how to add X number of people to my email list, I would have said like, I don't have time for this like clay thing on a Tuesday night. But then when I look at like, oh, but this is actually like, this is the life I'm trying to cultivate. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so important. Like, of course I'm going to show up for that. It's going to feed my soul. It's going to make me a better designer. It's going to make me feel more inspired. Like I'm going to have more space for things that need my attention. I'm going to prioritize making time to like watch the Martha Stewart documentary because like this aligns with like things that I want for my life in the future. So I just start to kind of see what needs my energy in a different way.
That's huge and so practical because we often ask folks, right? Like when we're doing their branding, what's your mission, vision, what's your values? And we're throwing around this word of vision so much, but this is such a good way of what it looks like practically, what it looks like to cast it. And then also it gives, this is my soapbox, Kadie, of I so believe that you could set goals and achieve them. And do you want to be that kind of person once you've achieved those goals? Like, have you thought about that? Who is the person you're becoming as you're building these great businesses, as you're building these wonderful brands? Are you proud of that future person? Because as you were telling this story, it sounds like little movements today, right? It sounds like, okay, well, I'm going to end work at 4:30 so I can spend time on this recipe so I can make this recipe a few more times. So it becomes a signature dish. So it becomes an addition to my repertoire as a cook, right? And it was like a small action today. And we were recently in Mexico and we were just by the water and just looking at these boats and like just thinking about what's like to drive and like steer a ship. You're putting the rudder just like you're steering it just a little bit more toward the direction. And it doesn't seem like a big push when you're doing it, right? It's just the smallest thing. But then over time, when you see how far you've come over the year, 5 or 10 years, this is the kind of Kadie wanted to become this whole time. And this is such the power of vision. And this is such the power of vision casting. What, in your opinion, as I know you've been onboarding clients this week, talking to clients this week, how do you highlight the importance of vision for businesses and brands?
I think that's such a good question because I think one of the things that the vision showed me how much my personal life is important and that my business is meant to support the kind of life I want to live, but then how much what I value in my personal life has to be present in my business. And I think I had really at different times in my business gotten so into like more revenue, more clients, bigger projects, because that's a sign of business success. But when I think about like, what do I want in my life? It's like slowness, intention, doing it well, nurturing like less but better relationships, thoughtfulness and consideration, which is all like slowing down in order to do it better or do it at a higher level of excellence. So as I'm bringing clients on, I also want that energy to match. And so when I'm like talking to clients, I'm like, oh, if they're coming from this place of like, we have to do it now, we have to get it out there, we have to be better than everyone else, like everyone in my industry, I have to blow them out of the water. Like we're trying to be like super disruptive. I'm like, I'm just not, this isn't the agency for you. Cause we're telling like stories where like there's room for everybody. There's a different style of everyone to do this. I want you to find like deep confidence and meaning in what you're doing and not just try to be better than everybody else, but just be a better you. And find people that you can really serve. And it's a lot more identity work. I think in the space of branding and websites, there's so many directions you can take, and there's value to all of them. Like there's value to high conversion. There's value to, launching messy or showing people that it can be done quickly. Like there's so much value in economically changing your position or creating more abundance. And I'm trying to find the value in slowing down and finding the story in it, the deep meaning and symbolism. And I really want to work with clients who find the process of building just as exciting as where they're going. So for instance, like you attract what you put out, and the clients that we're working with right now, I'm like so deeply inspired by, and it feels fun, like hearing their vision for their life, what they're trying to build, the meaning that it has for them and their families, their excitement, their inspiration. It fuels me. It makes me want to do a better job. Then I get excited. I start dreaming and expanding it. And there's just so much alignment that way. And so I also have thought like, okay, well then where I get my guidance and my advice and resources has to be from people who share a similar ethos. Otherwise it's going to really muddy if like the systems of my business and the messaging don't really align with how I operate or communicate. It's just going to be a completely confusing experience. So I've been trying to do a lot more soul searching, and there's so much information in the online space. How can I make it apply to the way that I want to run my business and like take what's helpful and really leave the rest?
Yeah, that's huge. Just because we've grown up in a world, in a society where it's like compete, be the best. And so we're having to rewrite a lot of these things of, hey, there is space for all of us. Hey, the quality and depth is more important than the quantity of people. And it's a hard thing to go against, but it seems like you're doing the work. And I feel like a lot of business owners, as they're trying to build these brands, need to remember that even if you're early on, we love the gusto, we love the go. But remember, what is actually important to you? How are you building a life that you'll really be proud of? Which really interesting, just because so you live nomadically, you run a business nomadically, and you hosted an international retreat in Costa Rica. Tell us a little bit about that, because I remember reading that in your recap, you had a great number of folks come out and you said, we have so much to learn from each other under the service. Tell us more about that. How was the retreat? How was it leading it?
It was incredible. It was a completely different experience than anything I've ever done. I mean, so much of these relationships that I've formed have been through a screen and polished and curated. And then you throw a bunch of people into an in-person experience in a place that's very uncontrollable. I mean, Costa Rica is like not a controlled environment, which we learned because we intentionally set the retreat for dry season. But the beginning of the retreat, we unexpectedly got a hurricane that was supposed to be done in like a day or two. It was followed by an unexpected swell of a tropical storm. And the whole week was like bad weather. And so you're like, oh, this place that's paradise that like I know is paradise during like dry season is not showing its best colors right now. And also, this is such a raw environment. So much of it is undeveloped. It's all dirt roads and bugs and heat and humidity. And with any raw environment, it's going to bring up a lot of emotion. But what we wanted to do, it was a departure from, you know, what I typically do with Drop Cap, which was beautiful in so many ways. But this idea that as business owners, like our business is only as healthy as we are as people. And so if we have blocks or like things that we need to develop within just our own personality and quality of life and like things that we need to release, it's not just about having a better business strategy. It's about continuously becoming a better person along the way. Like an updated mission statement or updated brand values is only going to take you so far if you're not also doing the work yourself. So it was this hybrid between personal development, yoga, wellness, restoration, and how do we apply that to our business and how we're showing up. And it was the coolest, most like emotional, freeing, like intense experience of kind of learning what's going on in everyone's lives and what our fears are and the things that hold us back and the awful things that we say to ourselves that we would like never say to somebody else. But it's this thought process and then releasing so much of that to claim a different story and a different perspective moving forward. And to witness what was so cool, especially about this group, is a lot of these women have gotten to know each other within the communities of the programs that I've launched or clients that I've worked with. So they've formed some like loose friendships, just like being part of the Drop Cap world. To see them show up for each other personally on such a deeper level, to really share with a lot of transparency, to offer so much, not only encouragement, but like good advice. I think what I was so inspired by is that there are some really incredible people within the Drop Cap community that I feel so honored to know. I was like, you guys just like, you're inspiring me so much to like see the world differently through different lens. And I just think there's something so powerful about like being together in person and also sharing like what's really going on, because we're all, you know, not doing it perfectly. There's some things we figured out and that was really fun to get to share with each other. But like, there's a lot of life that we're all still like in process with, and running a business online can feel so isolating. And to get together and like share and release a lot of like the roadblocks in a really intense place. One of the girls, just the way that she embraced the wildness of Costa Rica was so inspiring. Another one of the women had like a fear of the ocean, and watching her do a surfing lesson was so inspiring. So it was just these like little moments of putting yourself out there, letting yourself be bad at something, and then seeing how it's met with so much encouragement was just really cool. It was awesome.
I love to hear that. I do feel like our world craves in-person experiences, and we're like fully aware that in-person experiences gets us out of our really safe offline bubble.
Totally.
And it can also bring this, what you said, like wildness and an extra ounce of energy or perspective, especially into our businesses. I am such a firm believer that business leaders affect so much of your business culture and your brand culture. And so if you want a healthy business healthy cultures, because you are impacting the world, you're impacting clients and the people you serve. Like you said, we have to pay attention to these things going on beneath the surface. We have to pay attention to the
Totally.
lives they're leading. And it sounds like you created a space that was a bit of a catalyst for these people to have it all come together. Also, I love hearing when things like you planned it perfectly, but sometimes things just go wrong, you know?
Here's the other thing. At the end of the trip, they shut the airport down because the storm had damaged the runway and they had to repair the runway. So there was even this moment of like, I don't know how to get you guys home. And like one of the women had a newborn baby. You know, there's nothing worse than like paradise turning into prison, like you're trapped. And the way that when the sheen of like the tropical paradise like isn't quite possible because of like weather or whatever, that the real personalities came out and like in such an amazing way, like so much graciousness, so much appreciation, like so much understanding. I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like we're all just normal humans learning how to like be in relationship with each other. And there's like a lot more graciousness than like, it doesn't have to be perfect to be good, you know?
Yeah, and like the armor wears off. We don't have to
Yeah.
put on this face, which when it comes to brands, there's so much that we like put so much intention. That's like the fun part of planning our brands. And at the same time, people are just craving the humanness of people. People are craving just to do life with other people who are also real, because we know we're real people. And so it sounds like you got the unplanned opportunity to see those different layers, to see those different things. Speaking of planning, we also love to do like business case studies, because did you ever think that Drop Camp would also host a retreat? Like, did you ever think you'd be here 10 years later after you started? No. Like, we need more of these stories so that people understand, especially as they're early on and leading a business, like, hey, you know, these things kind of come about step by step.
Do you ever feel overwhelmed by the many hats you wear as a small business owner? We get it. At Come Plum, we want to keep you in your zone of genius. Our brand coaching services help you with everything from your brand foundations to your brand and business strategy and to your brand expression, all those fun things like logos, websites, videos, photos, and more. Mention that you heard about Come Plum on the Branding Your Business podcast when you fill out the contact form at comeplum.com. And you can receive extra bonus things like an extra hour of coaching or even 10% off your coaching package. We can't wait to build a brand that resonates with your audience and aligns with your values.
So you told us a little bit in the beginning about Designs by Kadie, right? It was that at the beginning, but then you also started hiring people. Let's kind of break down your studio and agency so we and other online businesses, other agencies can learn from you too. What kind of teams and systems have you built? What worked well? What didn't work well?
Yeah. I feel like I've tried it all. Dropcam has been like such a experience of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So I have like scaled up and scaled down a million times. I've hired full-time employees, part-time employees, contractors, other agencies as white label. Like you name it, I've tried it. I think early on, I tried to scale way too fast and didn't have the infrastructure and got really overwhelmed by suddenly going from being like a pretty green designer in my early 20s to basically managing and operating an agency with like not a lot of business experience. So that did not sustain. So I scaled back down. And then my next thought, which was, I mean, anytime you have to build up and then scale down, all of a sudden you've created this like fear that that same thing could happen again. So then you're having to not only do it again and figure it out, but also overcome the fear that you didn't quite hit the nail on the head the first time. So then it was like a matter of what do I hand off? Is it that I'm handing off operations? Am I handing off design work and like building other designers? Am I trying to expand our offerings by hiring people who do things that I can't do? And so I've done a lot of hybrids of that. What I have found that has worked the best is really hiring a contract-based creative team. And why I feel like that has been so useful is because one, it allows me to manage the ebb and flow of busy and slow seasons. Because what I learned the most is that to sustain a full-time agency, you have to be an expert in marketing and like keeping your lead gen up really high. I, as I'm sure you can tell just from talking about vision casting, am not someone who's like a consistent gung ho aggressive marketer. I really like to nurture relationships, which means a lot of our clients, we start the conversation sometimes years before the project starts. So there's this long runway of like building relationship, helping people where they are, getting to know each other. And it's amazing as far as when we finally get there. It does not work well for a full-time team because it just means that there are like high seasons and low seasons that become like very difficult to manage. So working with contractors has been a great way of being like, I'm going to continue to like invest in you, bring you alongside more on like an as needed basis. And it also creates this opportunity to thrive on their end with like increased portfolio work and like increased network. And it allows me to also bring on a lot of different styles and skill sets and like a longer list of potential creative team members based on the project. So that also has allowed me to be a lot more thoughtful in who I'm bringing in that would best benefit the client. So for instance, like we have a ton of copywriters. One is like has a ton of experience in the hospitality wellness yoga space. So it's like every time I bring in a client in that space, I'm like, this is so wonderful because it's not just a copywriter, it's a copywriter who loves your industry. So like obviously the work is going to be that much better and more heartfelt. So it's also allowed me like make more connections and stay in more of like a creative director role. One of the things I would love to do as things grow and sustain, and my big 2025 goal is figuring out passive revenue, because I know that once you have that baseline of more consistent passive, it allows you to build out things like operations and marketing and things that really keep things sustainable, even as my artistic brain gets really hyper focused on something, really invested, and then switches gears to like a new obsession. And so having somebody who's more in that like consistent operational place really helps like keep the things that I've started with a lot of energy and obsession, keep them growing so that it's not just like start, stop, start, you know. I have really had to sharpen some of my weaknesses in trying to build drop cap. And like the biggest one that has been a struggle for me is really consistency.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, it's also your gifting, right? Like, because you can have bursts of energy because you can go down rabbit holes. But when you're like, okay, can you actually just do this thing throughout the year? You're like,
But yeah, like a newsletter. Who knew that the hardest part of drop cap has been trying to send out the Sunday edition every week? Because I'm like, some weeks it comes with so much just like inspiration and I'm writing and I'm feeling creative. And then like the weeks that it's not coming, I'm like, I can't send out something that's uninspired. Like that just like doesn't work for me. And so my biggest dream would be one day to like have someone in that role who can be like, oh, but remember you had 25 ideas for the Sunday edition 2 weeks ago. So maybe we can pull from that instead of me trying to tap into something consistently every week. Like it's just like a different personality set, and bringing the two together is like magic.
well, this is a really great agency case study too, in that no founder has all the skill sets. No founder has all the strengths too. And so there's so much self-awareness here is what I'm hearing. There's also a lot of experimentation and being okay with trying something out and then backing up and then working with your own self and your mindset to get over the fear of having to start again. This is the real stuff of running a business. This is the real stuff of being the leader and the visionary. This is the pros and the cons of it too, just because we hear that a lot. Like, okay, you know, passive income, we have to make it, but no passive income comes by with passive like energy. It actually takes a lot of energy And I am with you, sister, and we're like trying to wait for the inspiration to do it. And sometimes we have to just bank a lot of that, invest some of that energy. So when we do need it, like it's going to be there, because it sounds like right now you have some passive income streams, but your team is doing a lot of custom work, but we're trying to build up that passive. Is that right?
Oh, 100%. So like talk about like realizing that I do my best work in like bursts of high intense inspiration. That is how my courses have come about, is like this obsessive rabbit hole of like, oh my gosh, I have an idea. I have to see it through to the nth degree. I'm like, living for this idea. I can't think of anything else. I'm like pouring every ounce of energy into it, denying every act of self-care because like this idea has to come to fruition. Absolute insanity. And I come out with a product that I love, but then all of a sudden I'm like, my gosh, now I have to market this thing. Like I just used every like storehouse of energy to even like birth it. Like I can't even begin to put together a marketing strategy. But it's funny because during another burst of like inspiration and momentum, I put together my launch sequence. And so sometimes what I've had to learn to do is trust that the good ideas I had when I was inspired can be rinsed and repeated, even if they're not like an immediate creation. And I think that's been like the biggest thing for me, is like, don't reinvent the wheel. The first time you did it, you put so much time and intention into it. You can put that out again, even if it's not like an in the moment burst of creativity, which I think is like that artistic mind, where you kind of think like, I'm creating everything in the moment. It's a one-time thing. And then I'm going to like reinvent it for something else. Really letting those systems play out and trusting that like you've built something good and you can just kind of keep trusting it from there on. But one of the things that I'm like really trying to lean into is repurposing creativity this year, because I think otherwise like creative burnout exists.
It's very, very real. I hear that. And I feel like we look for sources of inspiration. We look for people to look up to be able to build these businesses. You watch the Martha documentary. What was that like? I have not watched it. I've heard some recaps. Like, who are the other entrepreneurs you look up to? Tell us more about that.
Okay. This documentary I loved. I think what I was so inspired by is that she found a way to build success being herself. And herself, while the whole like, shtick is like perfection. Oh, this is perfect. It's so perfect. It's so perfect. And then it was like the fall of perfect. But what I took away from the documentary is like, she didn't build a brand on being perfect. She built a brand on like, this is how I want it done. I'm not going to try to be your best friend. I'm not going to be the most like nurturing, like gentle, sweet spirited woman you've ever met. I'm hard. I want it done this way. And this is the way it's going to happen. And while that's not my mode, because like I would say my personality is probably a little bit more opposite, seeing that like you can build something that matches your personality, that matches your interests, and with enough dedication and commitment to the vision and not giving up, you can continue to rebuild it. And I'm like, she built this huge empire. She broke so many records. She was the first female self-made billionaire, which is huge, on entertaining, basically throwing dinner parties in the 80s, which is crazy. And then to go to prison and basically create this garden and entertainment opportunity within her fellow inmates, amazing. To come out and experience so much public backlash, her company tanking, and then reinventing herself while still being herself and come all the way back up. I'm just like, that is such a testament to authenticity. I mean, I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, which is like the epicenter of like Southern living. We lived by these entertainment magazines growing up. Like Garden and Gun was a crossover in Charleston. Like we loved entertainment magazines. Martha Stewart was like very much a part of my childhood. And I remember thinking like, she thinks she's so perfect. It's such a facade. And in watching the documentary, I'm like, no, she has such a dedication to things being done the right way. It's actually such an authentic expression for her. And I just think it was really cool. And I love like ending the documentary and like her relationship with Snoop Dogg and like her finding this like new cultural relevance and that it can resonate with not just other housewives, but like the hip hop industry. Like, are you kidding? And it's just so cool to me. Like, it was just so inspiring of like, be yourself.
Yeah, I'm a big like Snoop and Martha, like that dynamic duo. They're just so good. But it comes full circle to what we were talking about at the beginning is this is a woman with vision. This is someone who led a brand with vision and she stuck to it. And so we love to see that. I want to play a little game with you now, Kadie. And maybe Martha's name will come up, but this is like our branding deck when we're in the studio and we have to help people find their values. We ask them a few of these, like they could say yes, no, yes, no, but we're going to use this as a really fun deck in that I'm going to pull up one of these cards and you're going to come up with a brand or a business or the first thing that comes to your mind when it's this word. So I'm shuffling here right now. So who knows what it'll be? We'll pick like 5 of them, okay? And I know it'll kind of be mirrored to you, but can you read this? It says conventional.
Conventional. I'm like all of a sudden question mark, do I even know what conventional means? But like ordinary, right? Like standard.
Yeah.
Maybe home goods, like basic.
Okay. Yeah. I feel that. Yeah. Okay. Kind of swing the other way. Futuristic.
Canva, honestly.
They're innovating all the time.
It's amazing. I like tuned into their like global conference or where they talk about the updates and I'm like, it's just they are turning design software on its head and love to see it.
Love to see it. Okay, austere. Do I even know what that word means, Kadie? That's a great question.
Would that be like intense?
Severe or strict in manner, attitude, or appearance.
Honestly, probably Martha.
Okay, perfect. Okay, artistic. I don't know if you can see that.
Artistic. I mean, gosh, like every single client I work with. But you know, one that weirdly comes to mind. Do you know the Jungle Love?
No, tell me more.
It's a design blogger. I can't remember her
Yeah,
name.
and then she had a line at Target.
Yeah, and she blended this like maximalism, print heavy, like vibe right in the midst of so much minimalism. And like when we all went one way, she went the other. So I would say artistic.
I love it. An innovator. Okay, last one. Oh, this is good. Emotional.
Emotional. What is a brand that sparks emotion for me? It's like it can go in so many different directions. Like part of me is thinking of like all of the nonprofits that I've worked with, but I'm also like anything having to do with pets or animals of any kind, like pulls at every last heartstring for me. But let me think of one that's emotional. I mean, honestly, the Make-A-Wish Foundation always gets me. That was like our big charity in college, and every single story of like people's dreams coming true when they're facing challenges is like the most emotional, inspiring thing to me.
Yes, I agree. Hands down, 100%. All the animals, all the things, all the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
That is a hard deck. It's
a hard deck. I couldn't even prep you what it was going to pull out. And also, I could not promise you I knew all the word definitions. So
I'm like, I really need to brush up on my vocabulary.
Yeah. No, I feel you, sister. People are going to want to connect with you and be in your world. How can they find you online?
So you can find me Dropcap Design on social media, but honestly, the best way to connect with me is the Sunday edition, which is my every Sunday newsletter. But I share stories of like living abroad and what I'm working on, what I'm learning in my business, and little practices like that vision casting that are inspiring me in my life that I want to share.
I love that. Yeah, we'll link that in the show notes. You can further connect with Kadie too. And again, she helps a lot of businesses really have this soul that she talks about too. So please connect with her further. Thank you so much, Kadie, for being on this show. We loved having you.
I've loved that.